In this video, we're going to make a country profile map in the style of a BBC map in QGIS. So I'll go to the BBC page that's got country profiles on it, and the links to all these sites are in the description. I'll click Bangladesh. We don't want to do that. And we see a country profile map. If I open it in a new tab, we can see what it looks like. Now what we need to do now is get the data. So the layers we need here are one country layer, a layer for the lakes, and a layer for the cities. So we'll get this from the Natural Earth website. If I go back to the downloads page, naturalerthdata.com, and on the downloads page, we'll get the large scale data. It's a bit more detailed. We'll go to physical first of all, scroll down, and we want to download lakes and reservoirs. This will give you a zipped folder with a shapefile in it. So I'll click on download lakes, and I'm going to save this into a folder I've already created for this project. So I'll hit save on that. I'll go back the way and I'll click on cultural. I'm going to get country boundaries here. If you have a country where there are disputed borders, or a country has a particular view of what the world borders are, you could use the country's point of views files. I'm going to use the top one, so I'll click on download countries and it'll give me a zipped shape file. I'll save that, and the other one I need here is a shape file as well. Click save. Now if I open up that folder, I've got 3 zipped files. Now if you're on a Windows machine, you'll unzip these. If you're on a Mac or Linux, that's not going to be the same thing. So I'll select all these. I'll right click. I use 7-zip to unzip stuff, but you can use extract all if you don't have 7-zip. And I'm going to extract them here. And just as a reminder, if anyone's not familiar with this, a shapefile has many parts to it. So keep all the files. What I'll do here is I'll sort by type. I'll highlight individually with Control held down the SHP files. So that's the 3 layers I need. Let me go to QGIS and I'll get these 3 highlighted files up. And I can left click and drag and drop them into the map canvas or into the layers panel. I'll let them go and they'll add to the map. You can also always add layers in QGIS via the Open Data Source Manager button, and then go to Vector and then browse to where your files are. But I prefer to drag and drop them in. Okay, fine. So we've got some ugly looking map stuff here. Let's do a couple of things first. I'm going to organize my windows in a certain way so that I've got my QGIS on the right and my BBC Bangladesh map on the left. So I'll just do that quickly while I pause. The reason for doing this is it makes it easier for me to copy the colors. First of all, I'm going to zoom into roughly the Bangladesh area. And let's get started. So what I'll do is I'll drag and drop the lakes layer on top of the land layer. Now I'm going to double click the land layer and make sure I'm on symbology. I'll click on simple fill because that's the fill style. And the fill color section has got a little drop down at the end of it, just at the end of the color patch. I'll click on that and I'll click pick color, and I'll move over to the grey area of the countries and I'll click it. Now if you're on a Mac, sometimes it looks like it's not going to work, but it should do. But what I can show you here is if I click on the color patch, you can see the color code there. It's E8E7EA. So you can copy that if you need to from here, but the color picker should work. What I'll do for the boundary style is I'll drag and drop the fill color to the stroke color, and then I'll click on the stroke color and I'll just change the V value. I'll just darken it maybe to about 73%. That just changes the darkness. I'll click OK and I'll apply that. And let's see, that looks pretty decent. I'll maybe make it a little bit darker. Maybe take it down to 65. Click OK and apply. Okay, that's fine. Click OK on that. So the next thing I want to do is I want to make the lakes the correct color. So I'll double click on the lake. I'll use the color from the Bay of Bengal. I'll drag and drop it to the stroke color as well, and I'll click apply and OK. We're getting somewhere now, good. So what we do now is we'll go to Project and then Properties. We'll go to General, and in the background color, we want it to be the same as the lake, so kind of for water. And if you click on the drop down, you'll see my recent colors is in there, and then I can click Apply. Okay. Now we currently have loads of cities and we don't want that. So we'll use a filter. We'll right click and we'll go to Filter. And in this section, what we see, the fields are all the columns in the data table for this points layer. There's one called Name. So we can double click Name, we can click Equals, and then if I hit All, it's going to list all the cities in the name column. So in the search, I'll just type in Dhaka, and then I'll select it and double click it, and it goes into the box down below, Name equals Dhaka. If I test that, we see there's one row because there's one city called Dhaka. Let's click OK and OK. Now we're going to double click on that layer in the layers panel. The marker, as we can see, is a little square, white fill, black outline. So let's change it. At the moment it's on simple marker. Where do we find the square? We scroll down. The size is probably going to be like, I don't know, we can experiment with this, but let's try 3.4. Let's use a white fill and click Apply. Alright, that may be too big, but just wait and see. Click OK. And we're getting somewhere, but we don't have that orange Bangladesh. The easiest way to do this is going to be to right click on the countries layer and duplicate it. And I'll move it above the original grey one. And I'm going to right click the copy layer and filter it. So here I can see the name column. Double click Name equals, I'll click All, and in the search box click Bangladesh, and let's click on OK, and I'll turn it on. Now we don't see anything different because it's the same color, so let's double click the copied layer in the layers panel, make sure I'm in symbology, click on simple fill, and this time I'm just going to copy the color. So the fill color, I'll click on the little arrow, pick color, and I'll just use the color from the map, and that is FFEBC0. I'll click OK. I will also change the stroke color to match the one we already used, which is this one. Click OK. There we go. So now it's starting to look more like a BBC map. At this stage, what I will probably do is switch to a print layout so I can add some other stuff. So I'll maximize QGIS. I'll save my project quickly, project, save as, and I'll just save it into my working folder. I'll just call it Bangladesh country map. I'll click save, and now I'll go to the project menu, layout, new print layout, and I'll call it Bangladesh. I'll click OK. At this stage, you need to decide before you do anything what page size you want. Well, I want my page to fill a screen. So I'll right click on the white blank page and go to page properties. The screen ratio is 16:9. I like to do 320 wide by 180 high. So it will fill a mobile or a monitor screen. Once I've done that, I'll always click on this button, zoom full. It's a magnifying glass with the arrows pointing outwards. And what that does is it makes the page fill the print layout area. Next thing is add a map, and that's with the add map button. You can drag and drop anywhere, and then you can reposition it, and it will click and snap to corners and centers. So now I'm going to do that, and let's just go back to our BBC map. We can see the extent, so we can see all of Bangladesh and a little bit north. We can see all of Bangladesh and a little bit south. We can see a little bit of Myanmar and India too. So I will sort this out, and to do that, there's various ways you can do it, but the move item content button on the left, I can move things around within the frame. Now if I hold down Control as I use my scroll wheel to zoom, it does a much finer zoom, like this. Okay, so I'll do that, and then I'll left click to drag it. That's about right, maybe one more in. So about that, let me just check. That's not bad. Let me see, what do we want to do? Dhaka. I maybe want to make the outline of the black square a bit thicker, so let's go back to the main map canvas. I'll double click on the populated places layer, go to simple marker, and then in the stroke style, the stroke width is hairline, let's make it 0.4. And instead of the join style being bevel, let's make it miter. That'll make the corners of the square symbol really sharp. I'll click OK. I'll go back to my print layer and hit refresh. Okay, that's okay. So what we need now is some labels. Lots of ways to do this, but the easiest way is to use a label tool. So in the populated places layer, I'll double click it. I'll go to labels, and from no labels, I'll choose single labels. It already has name as a value, so that's fine. I go to text. I'm going to change the font to Arial. I think the BBC use Arial or Helvetica. I'll change the size to 16 actually. And the colour, I'm not going to use black, I'm going to use 222222. It's very dark but not quite black. I'll click OK and OK. Okay, we've got a label for Dhaka. For the country, let me hit refresh in the print layout. So that's looking better. The the country names, there's a number of ways we can do this actually. We can turn on country labels, but you can end up fiddling around with these for ages. So let me just show you what I mean by that. So if I turn on country labels, I'll double click the countries layer. I'll go to labels. I can turn on single labels with name. I can go to formatting and change the type case to all uppercase. I can change the text to Arial. And I can change the size to 16 and click apply and OK. If I go to the print layer and hit refresh, that might work okay. If we go back to the actual map, we can see it's all right. The India label, because India extends all the way around Bangladesh, we get this kind of odd placement. So in this situation, what I'd probably do is do it manually in the print layout. You can also, in the main map canvas, use in the toolbar the move a label diagram or call out. You can do that to move labels manually, but in this case what I'm going to do is I'll double click on the countries layer and I'll just turn the labels to no labels, and we'll just do this manually. So let me move the windows side by side so I can copy the BBC one. I'm going to move my print layout over to the right and the BBC map on the left as I lay it out. Okay, so it's a bit squished, but that's fine. I just need to add the Bangladesh label. So there's a text box here. I can add it there, and on the right, the item properties allows me to write in here Bangladesh in all caps. Like I said, it's a bit squished here on the right, but if I scroll down, click on the font button, let's change that to 16 Arial, and let's change the color to what I had already, 222222. Okay, so how's that looking? I'll center that and put it in the middle of the box. That's roughly about right. And we're going to maximize this, and I'm going to copy it, so Control C and Control V a couple of times. We're going to put the India label over here. We're going to put Myanmar over here. So when you select an item on the map, it's always with the select button. When you select it, if you go over to the right hand side, the item properties can be edited. So we'll call that India, and the next one is going to be Myanmar. So what else do we have that we need to do? Well, we've got in the BBC map, we've got Bay of Bengal written in the Bay of Bengal in italic. So let's add that. I'll just add this here. Bay of Bengal. Click on the font button. Let's increase that size to 16. Let's make it Arial. Let's make it italic. And the color, let's click on the color drop down and pick color. We're going to choose the color from the sea, so it'll disappear, but then I'll click on the color patch and scroll down. I'm just going to make this darker, so it's from the same color palette as you will, if you will. Okay, Bay of Bengal, that's fine. Now we have an inset map in the top left and we have a flag in the bottom right, and we'll add those, but let's just look at the map now and hit refresh. So it's looking pretty decent. I think if we go back here to the properties for the Bay of Bengal label, I like to stick that in the center of the box. Bay of Bengal. Okay, so how do we get a inset map in the top right and a flag in the bottom? Inset map in the top left and a flag in the bottom right. Let's see. It's pretty straightforward, but it can be confusing. So if I click on add map, I'm going to add another map up here. And then I'm going to scroll over to the right. And I need to go to overviews. Let me just double check the way to do this. So then I click on add a new overview, and the map frame is going to be map 1. So you see what happened there. In my map in the top left, what happened was it now has a little square area in it that's filled in pink frame. So what I'll do is I'll choose configure symbol. So in the map frame style on the right, I'll choose configure symbol, and it's on simple fill. So let me just move this separator up. This is a bit fiddly, but follow along, you'll get it. The stroke style is going to be a solid line, and the fill is going to be transparent. So it now gives us a box. Okay. And that's almost right, but if we dock it in the top left and go like this, we can move it around. There's a couple of things we'll want to change though. So if I go back to the BBC map, you can see the top left map is much more basic. It's just got a box and a very simple map. And we can do that, but it just takes a couple more steps. So what I'm going to do to achieve this is I'm going to go back to my main map layer. And for the big map, so for the main page one, I want all the layers to be included. So I'm going to highlight them all like that. And I'm going to click this little I button, and I'm going to click add theme. I'm just going to call this theme full, actually call this all layers. Stick with me because this will be really useful. I'll click OK. And then what I'm going to do is in the little inset map, all I actually want to appear in the inset map is, let me check. Yep, I just want basic land layer, not even with country boundaries. So I'm going to duplicate the countries layer, and I'll double click it and I'll go to symbology. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to drag and drop the fill to the stroke color so it just has land. See what I mean? And then I'll click on this little I button and I'll click add theme. Now the themes thing can be a bit tricky to get, but don't worry. You'll see what it does in a minute. So I'll click land and click OK. So don't worry about what's ticked on and off there. If I go back to my print layer and hit refresh, it looks like everything's messed up, but we'll fix that. So make sure you've got the main map selected, the big map, and you can do that with the arrow. Click it. And we're going to follow a map theme because we just made a map theme. So I'll tick the box on the right and we'll choose all layers. And that big map is using all the layers in that map theme we created. The one in the top left, we have a different map theme. So we'll follow the map theme there, and that's just going to be land. Because all we want to do is show where in the world Bangladesh is. I think what we'll probably do is in the country copies layer, we'll go back into it. So this is the one for the inset map. I'll go to simple fill and I'll change the stroke width to 0.1, and I will click the stroke color and I'll darken it. I think we do want to show some country boundaries there. So I'll click on OK and I'll go back to the print layer and I'll hit refresh. All right, so that's probably a bit better, more like what I want. To move, so remember when you're working with a layout, the big arrow is to select or move items, and the one below it will allow you to move things within it. And what's happening here in the relationship between the big map on the full page and the little map is that black rectangle shows the area covered by the big map, right? So we can see what it is. Now let me just move the little map. This is how I want it to appear. In the BBC map, it's a bit more zoomed out so you can see parts of Africa and Australia. We could do that if we wanted to. I'm going to leave it like this. We're almost there, but on the BBC map, we do have a Bangladesh flag. So what I'd usually do in this situation is open a tab, go to Bangladesh, just type in Bangladesh, and go to the Bangladesh Wikipedia page, and you'll find a flag there. So I'm going to click on it, and usually you think this is the full URL of the flag, but if I click on it again, then it'll just be the flag on the page. If I copy the URL from here, it's not going to work. I need to click on it with my mouse. So I'm going to copy this URL, and it's an SVG graphic of the Bangladesh flag. So I'm going to copy that. Let's go back to the map layout, and the button we need now is the one that looks like a little picture to add a picture. Let's drag and drop in an area where we want the flag to appear. We have then got to go over to item properties and SVG image. If I scroll down, I need to move this a little bit wider sometimes, and then I can scroll down. Actually, I need to move this a bit more, there we go, to see the scroll bar. And if you had the SVG file saved in your computer, you browse to it from here. But in this case, I'm just going to add it from the web. So I'll paste in that URL there. You see a little cloud with a down arrow at some point. That just means it's downloading it. Let me just click this button to zoom full. Now that will sometimes take a second to display. I'll hit refresh, and we have a Bangladesh flag. Great. So if I scroll down, sorry, the placement, I can put it in the bottom right of my frame. Let's go back to the BBC map. Okay, so that is not quite in the corner in the BBC one. I can select it, and if I want to just quickly get it equidistant from the edges, I'll just hit my up arrow a couple of times and my left arrow a couple of times. So that's looking pretty decent. It's a Bangladesh country map. How does that compare if I move this over? I think my one looks quite nice and clean. The Bangladesh flag's possibly a bit big, so let's make it a little bit smaller. Okay. And I might want a little border around this, so let's maximize this, maximize the page layout, and let's add a little border to the frame for map 2. Scroll down in item properties, go to frame. Let's make the frame a little bit thinner. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing here. I'll select that map frame, I'll hit the right button or the right arrow a couple of times and the down a couple of times. So we're almost there. There's a couple of other things we could do here. If I click on any of the map frame and I want to use a different coordinate reference system, all the ones I've previously used are listed there. So I could change the coordinate reference system maybe to a local one. I can click this little button if I wanted to. So I could change that, but we're doing pretty well. If I hit save here, this is going to save the whole project again, including the print layout. If I want to add a scale bar, I would usually click add scale bar, and then I'd usually add one in, but I wouldn't use the default one. What I would usually do is, if I add a scale bar here, then I can go across to the right and edit its properties. So at the moment, there's 2 segments to the right, each of 100 kilometers. So I'll change that to 1. And I would usually do something like this, do 100 kilometers, and then I'll just draw a line. I'll add a rectangle. I like just to do it manually, and I'll size it the same way. So I'll make it the same size, like this. I'll change the style on the right. I'll change the fill to a dark fill. I'll configure the symbol. Click on simple fill. And then actually I'll take away the line. And if I go back the way on the right and go to position and size, I'll change the height to 0.5. And then I won't turn off the scale bar, I'll just untick it in the items list. And then I'll move this little scale bar like that. I'll just add a little text box in. And change the font to Arial, size 14. Like that. Oops. That's one way to do it. I like to do it manually like that. I'm going to hit save again. I'll turn off the 100 km label and the rectangle I drew. I'll turn on the scale bar. If I wanted to go and get it a bit like I did in my manual one, style-wise, I just need to select it, and then you can change all the things here. So the size of it, I can change it to 0.5 on the right. The labels, I could change it from kilometers to meters or miles. Now it goes to 100 miles. It's got 2 segments of 50. If I wanted 100, I could choose 100, and on the right I can choose it to have 1 segment. You can do that. You can experiment with that. A map like this, you're not necessarily always going to need or want a scale bar, but I usually use the scale bar tool to figure out the distance, and then I usually draw it in manually. But it's up to you how you do it. I'll stick with that for now. So there we have a map. I'll make sure that everything's fine. Looks good to me. I'll hit refresh one more time. I'll go to layout, export as image, and then I'm going to save it to my folder. I'll just call this Bangladesh.png. I'll hit save. 300 dpi is going to be fine. When you hit save, you'll get a green bar when it exports successfully towards the top. I'll click on that. It's going to take me to the folder where it is, and what I'll do here is I'll right click and I'll choose the Windows Photos app to open it. And let's pull that into screen. Okay, so that's not too bad at all. Let me just move it over to the right and get the BBC one back up. Well, I quite like my one, if I'm honest. It looks quite good. There's things we could change if we needed to. We've added a scale bar. The BBC didn't have one. They are using slightly different layers, so the coastline looks a bit different on mine than it does on theirs. That's fine. It's not a problem. It's just different data sources that we have used. But we can see what we need to see. We know where Bangladesh is in the world. We've got the inset map, and we've also got the flag for Bangladesh. So that's how you would go about creating a BBC style country profile map in QGIS. Takes a little while, but not too long, and then you could repeat that process for any country in the world. Hopefully you find that useful in your own work, and there's loads of useful things in there for you as you continue using QGIS.